For this week's fly, we have another Cali Galloup articulated streamer. This one is Boogie Man, probably behind the Sex Dungeon. One of my, it's probably number 2 behind the Dungeon. This is one of my, if the Dungeon's not picking fish up, this is one that I go to. It gets a little bit deeper in the water column because it has a wool head. Still some great swim to it. You get the little S swim in this pattern. It's just an all-around good fly. We're going to do this in olive today. We're going to go ahead and get started. Alright, to begin this we have, as always, Daiichi 2461. This is a size 2. Same as the Dungeon, I do this in a couple different sizes. This being the bigger version. I'll do it in smaller ones for springtime, and like I said before with the Dungeon, for patterns back home in Pennsylvania, I usually run them a little bit smaller than what I do out here. So we're going to start out with a marabou tail, same as usual, the dual plumes for the tail, a little bit longer than, same length or just slightly longer than your hook shank. We're going to add our flash in. This is gold flash boo. Two strands, doubled over. And then take the 4 strands that you have, fold those over to give you 8. Just a little bit of internal flash. Kind of draws a little bit of attention, sexies the fly up. On top of that, we're going to go with our second plume of marabou for the tail. And then bring this forward, build some bulk for your body. Open loop it to the back. Now we're going to pick out some yellow brassy size wire to hold down our schlopping that we're going to put in here a couple steps from now. Form your loop for your dubbing. And like I've said this before, I mean, I do dubbing loops for almost all of my streamer patterns. They just seem to work so much better with the ice dub. You can spin just the regular dubbing ropes with the ice dub if you want, but it seems to just looks a little bit better to me this way. It's a little bit easier to work with, and like I said, it just gives a little bit better of a presentation. So we'll get our loop ready, throw this in there, and pinch your thread, let it go, get your taper how you want it, and run it up to the front. wire's getting in my way there. That's not the color I wanted. Where did it go? There we are. So for our slopping on this, I'm using the Nature's Spirit Grizzly variant in olive. That's a sculpin olive. I'm knocking stuff over here. Find your spot where it wants to bend. Go a little bit up from that and tie this in. You can see on this, get that little piece out of the way. You can see on this feather right here how you have the concave and the convex side. When you tie this in, tie it in on the top to where the concave is sticking toward the back. That way when you wrap it, all of your materials are going to face toward the back. It just gives a better look. You don't trap near as much, and it's a lot easier to work with when you do that. We're going to grab, let me throw half hitch in here first. Keep that in place. And then throw it on our cradle. And then just advance this to the back. Fluff all your individual fibers out. A couple that don't want to play nice. And then take your wire in the opposite direction and rip it right through to the front. It's a little messy. Find our bodkin here and pick some of this stuff out that I trapped. That looks pretty good. Not going to get too picky on this. Now to finish off the back portion of this fly, we're going to use just a single mallard flank. The key thing to this is to make sure that you have a nice straight stem. If you have a stem that kind of comes up and veers off to the left or right, your fly is going to want to track that way, and it's always going to be falling over on its side. So you want to try and find something that's nice and straight, that's full. That way you get your fly tracks how you want it to. Now with this, lay it directly over the top of your hook shank, and it's going to go just past where your tail ends. So you measure this out. You can see how I have it here. Measure that out, peel the excess back. You can go ahead and trim this off. And you just lay this right over top. Hold that down, give it a few loose wraps just to get everything where you want it. Make sure we're good, and then you can tighten down. Give a few solid wraps on that, and then when you flip it over, you can see that that stem is following right with the shank of the hook. And that's a nice even profile that it gives. It's not thrown to one side or the other. This fly's going to track just how you want it. Whip finish this real quick. And color our thread. We'll be on to the front. And I didn't tie the eyes in advance like I said I was going to save a little bit of time, so you're just gonna have to listen to me ramble on about putting lead eyes on again. Color this up. And we're set. What I will do with these is I will take a little bit of Zap right on the top, right where this flank goes on, where I have it tied in, and I'll just touch it up with a little bit of Zap. Don't get carried away with it to where your glue's going to run into the actual feather. Just right where it's tied on, where the thread's laying over it, and then I leave it be at that. We're going to go to our front hook, the Daiichi 2461 size 1. This is a big fly, gives a lot of profile, swims really well, a lot of motion. We're going to go with a thread base, our nylon 6/0. Advance that. Find my eyes here. We're going to go with some yellow 7/32 lead eyes. Kind of get that thread where we want it. One loop around your eyes, figure 8 it. And before you get this too tight, if you want to move your eyes forward or backward, you can just kind of wiggle it back just a little bit, just to set them into place. Before you go getting too many wraps on there, you can move it slightly if you feel that you need to. And these ones are a little twisted on me here, and just work this how I want it. Looking pretty good. Get a shot of Zap on here. And same thing, go over your glue with the figure 8. And then around your eyes and under the hook. Grab some connection wire. And a bead. Very unprepared for this as far as cutting time down, but we'll get there. This fly doesn't take a whole lot of time, and if I can keep my yap shut for the majority of it, we should get through this pretty quick. Get your measurements how you want it. Put a little kink in your wire and then tie it down. Get over there. All the way to the front. Throw a quick knot in there. And we're ready for the gel spun. If you've watched the other videos, I tie a lot with this gel spun 100 from UTC. Just a great thread to work with for these streamers. Go back over top. Pull tight. And your eyes are pretty much locked in place. We're going to advance to the back, tightening down about every 4th or 5th wrap. We're at our same reference point right here, right where the barb of the hook starts to come up. And we're going to try and find something good and webby here. I'm getting to the end of this pack, so it may be a little slim pickings. And we'll just take some of this. This looks to be alright. We're going to cover up our connection with with a few schlappen fibers. I like it to be a little bit webbier than what this stuff is, but I mean it's gonna serve its purpose. A lot of our connection will be covered up by the top flank feather on the front hook, so I don't get too awful picky on this pattern. You can see we have our connection covered pretty well. Grab our yellow wire again. Couple good wraps over top of it. And I got that a little bit too long. I'm going to snip some off. Fold it back over itself. And then take your thread to the end. Start your dubbing loop. And then a half hitch. Grab your olive brown ice dub, throw it into your loop. And you have a nice taper, nice little rope there, easy to work with, and then you advance it right behind the eyes. Leave just a little bit of a gap. I don't know, that's maybe what, 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch, somewhere about that. So leave a little bit of room to work with because we still have to put a head on here. Try and grab a little bigger piece than what we did for the front or for the back. We're going to tie this in. Half hitch in the cradle. And then same as before, just work this right to the back, nice even spacing. Not a lot of tension on this, and it's a little wild right now, but we'll get that squared away. Not a ton of tension on this, just working your way to the back nice and slow. Focus on your spacing, and we should be good with that. Bring your wire through, tie it off. Now this one has a decent amount trapped. This is a really webby fiber, or really webby feather, so we're gonna have to spend a little bit of time picking this out with our bodkin. We've got a couple wild hairs right there. Just get rid of those. We have, like I said, a decent amount of stuff trapped in here. Nothing a bodkin won't fix, though. It's a really webby feather right there. Alright. Same thing with your flank feather. You're going to take this just over the top, and then it's going to go, I don't know, maybe a quarter of the way over your back feather. So when we lay this over, and I think I have a little bit too much, yeah, we're going to take some of this off. This is a really good feather. Take some of that off. There we go. And same as before, make sure that your stem is traveling right down the center of your hook. Loose wraps at first, just to capture everything in place, and then you can even go in between figure 8 over your dumbbell eyes and then tighten down. It fell out of place. And you can see how that kind of marries over the top one. I don't know, you're maybe a ½ inch over on your flank feathers from your top to, or from your front to your back. And then just go ahead and cut that excess stem. Now to finish the head of this fly, we're going to use some ram's wool. There's two different types. You have ram's wool or you have scalping wool. I prefer to use the ram's wool. It's just a little bit, it's not as straight, and you can see the waves and everything in this, as opposed to the scalping wool. When you pull this out of the package, you can see, I mean, it's all straight. The fibers are all straight. They're real, it's really easy to wind up with gaps on this just because they're so straight. I like the ones, the ram's wool as opposed to the scalping wool, just because it has these waves in it, and it covers things up a lot better. It just looks a lot, it's a lot easier to work with, in my opinion, and it looks a lot better. So I tend to use this stuff when I can find it. Zoom out so you can see what we're going to do cleaning this thing up. And the very tips of these, I'll just cut them off nice and straight. Once we run it through our comb here, run it both directions, it's not going to look near as straight as what that clean cut is. And then we're just going to, same as when we did the dungeon, I'm going to want the back portion of this to go between my hook point and the bend of my hook. So I'm just going to tie this in, nice loose wrap, and then a tight one. You can fold this over. We're going to take another little piece here. You don't need, get zoomed back in so we can see a little better what we have going on. You don't need a ton for the bottom. It's okay if the bottom's a little bit more sparse. You want the top to fill out really well. It's important to run this through the comb. That way it kind of, all of the fibers that are tangled up and going every which direction, when you tie them in, it can create a lot of bulk, and you can have air gaps eventually if you don't get everything cleaned out really well. So there's your bottom portion right there. And what I do, if you watched the Miss October video, I'm going to do the same thing with this. I grab a piece that's a lot thicker than what I just used for the top. I'm going to clean this up, run both ends through it, and we're good to go. Now, You can see how you have your sparse end at the tips and then your thick end at the back that you cut from the patch. I use that thick end right here, and then I'll just take my finger and create a little cone like that. I'll throw this over the top, and my thread is still right behind my eyes, and I'll come as close to my eyes as I possibly can. 2 loose wraps and then 1 tight one. I'll peel all of this stuff back and wrap right behind my eyes. Now with these next 2, we're going to do a top and a bottom. Top being a little bit thicker than the bottom. I want to come as close to my eyes on the front of them as possible. Just snip off the ends. Tighten that up, it's wanting to slide on me a little bit. It doesn't really matter which direction you tie it in, if you tie your sparse end, your tip end, or your back end in. Either way, it's not going to be a big deal. And then we have one more piece to tie in, and then we'll be set. Remember, just a little bit more sparse on the bottom than you have on the top. I'll peel this back and try and go right in front of it with my thread wraps. Go 1, 2, 1 tight. And then I'll go same thing, 2 loose, and then I'll really cinch down on it, and that'll actually take the last wraps that you tied on this bottom portion, and it will tighten it up even more. You can see it looks like we have an absolute mess right now, but it's going to look like a fly, I promise you. Go ahead and throw a whip finish on this. Okay, you can see the mess that we have of ram's wool. It's just everywhere. So what you do before you trim this, and we cleaned it up pretty well with the comb, just run your bodkin through it. It'll kind of untangle any fibers that are still trapped, and it'll eliminate you having a gap in the head when you go to trim this. We got some stuff flying all over the place. That really looks like a mess right there, but we're gonna make some sense of this in a second. So find the front of your hook with your scissors and then just cut right up on the front. It'll get some of that mess out of the way, let you know where your front is. And then I flip this over and I just start trimming. Don't go right to the bottom right off the bat. Just start getting rid of some of the fuzz that's on here. And then what I like to do with this bottom is I'll peel my schlappen away, and this is a nice flush cut on the bottom. Just right like that. Nice and easy. And then I'll just trim this up a little bit more just so it's flush on the bottom of the eyes. You can see right there. It's not the best view right now, but once we get the rest of this trimmed up, you'll be able to see how flush the bottom is compared to the top. And then same thing, you don't want to go right after this, you know, trying to form right off the bat. Just take some of the junk away before you go getting too aggressive on your cuts. And you're already starting to shape your head. You want a good wide, if you look at a scalp and it has a really wide head, you want to try to imitate that as you're trimming this. like I said, just don't get too aggressive right off the bat with your trim, because you want this to stay a bulky head. It's starting to take shape a little bit for us. So now what I typically do is I'll take this out of the vise and I'll trim this from behind. I don't know how well you can see it, but this is how I'll get my overall shape of the head. And on these heads, if you're gonna lean one way or the other as far as bulk or less bulk, lean toward the more bulk. It will slender down some in the water, so I tend to keep these a little bulkier than what I do most patterns. Kind of get our little V shape here on the front. And I like to keep this right here, I like to keep that a little thicker. It's looking pretty good. Now that we have our overall shape, you can go ahead and trim through this a little bit to give it a little bit more of a rounded appearance. If this were a fly that were going into my box, I would have been done a long time ago, but we're trying to make this a little sexier just because it's, well, everybody else is looking at it. Let me get one little cut right there. And there you have it. That is Kelly Galloup's articulated boogeyman. If there are any questions on this pattern, just leave them in the comments. I'll try to get back to you. And oh, I got a mess here. But like I said, this pattern, just overall a great pattern. I had a couple days on the Blackfoot last year where it just absolutely wrecked it, and this was the only pattern that they wanted to touch for some reason in this color. Like I said, any questions or comments on it, let me know and I'll get back to you as quick as I can. And we'll catch you on the next fly. Thanks.